Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. My name is Pedro Antonio Guerrero. I am the CEO of Guerrero Media and publisher of Hispanic Executive magazine. Today's event is a special one as it marks Hispanic Executive's 10th celebration of its annual Top 10 Líderes issue. This annual issue highlights 10 outstanding Latino and Latina trailblazers whose stories of impact reflect a paradigm of leadership that can serve as an inspiration for us all. These leaders represent the best of the best in our community. And as in previous issues, this year's lineup was carefully chosen to represent the impact that Hispanic leaders are having on a range of industries and businesses. Our honorees work in banking, entertainment, healthcare, political activism, and more. They've come a long way in their careers, managing to give back and bringing others along in their professional climb. And we at Hispanic Executive are honored to tell their stories and celebrate their success. I want to thank our longstanding partner, Bank of America, for sponsoring this gathering and for being a stalwart advocate for the Latino community. Before we begin our discussion, I want to recognize each of our top 10 líderes. First is our cover star, Marcos Rodriguez, who challenged the private equity world by showing that diversity and financial success are symbiotic. Marcos is the CEO of Palladium Equity Partners, a leading private equity firm he founded in 1997. Approximately 3/4 of all Palladium employees are diverse or female, making the firm among the most diverse in the private equity industry. Next, we have David Chavez, SVP and Chief Audit Executive at CVS Health, who shows us the importance of a culturally savvy CFO. David's financial and business acumen was on display at his previous role as the CFO for Latin America at Marathon Petroleum Corporation, when his in-depth understanding of Mexico's business climate played a critical part in the company's growth in the country. We have marketing leadership from people like Isis Rees, Chief Marketing Officer at Norwegian Cruise Lines. While the cruise industry was reeling from the pandemic, Easy saw the need to build up morale and confidence, creating the company's first in-house global campaign, which was focused on uplifting messages and content geared to inspire a sense of community and optimism for the future. Then we have EdTech leaders like Stephen Wolf Pereira, the CEO and co-founder of Encantos, which makes accessible educational tools and culturally relevant content for our underserved Latino community. As the pandemic raged on, Latino parents and teachers found themselves in dire need of digital creative learning tools. Stephen and his team rose to the challenge. Their efforts included providing free online learning hubs filled with quality content. We have leaders like Esther Aguilera, the CEO of Latino Corporate Directors Association, who are holding corporations accountable to diversify their corporate directors. In late 2020, the LCDA launched the California Board Equity Scorecard, which tracks every appointment made within the state to chart the progress of Latino leadership. As someone who ensures that companies know diversity includes Latinos, there's no better advocate for Latinos in corporate director positions than Esther and the LCDA. We also have entertainment leaders like Desiree Perez, the CEO of Rock Nation, a company founded by Jay-Z in 2008. When the live entertainment industry was hit hard by the pandemic, Desiree's creativity was on full display as she found new ways to support artists, execute business deals, and even produce major events such as the Super Bowl halftime show. Now for the four honorees joining us in conversation today. Cesar Rees is the founder, president, and CEO of Golden Years Home Care, which leads in an often overlooked area, the care of the elderly. By never forgetting his experiences taking care of his own grandmother and father, Cesar has focused on ensuring that everyone, from caregivers to the elderly, are treated with respect and dignity. The company is tackling persistent problems in the home care industry head on, by offering a living wage and educational programs that help retain and develop employees. Second, we have Natalie Rayas, who advocates and supports our community in the political arena. Natalie is the president and CEO of Latino Victory Project, and she worked exceptionally hard during the last presidential campaign, from spearheading efforts to organize phone banks and candidate fundraisers and more, all with a resolute focus on promoting Latino candidates and its mission, that the voices and values of Latinos are reflected at every level of government and in the policies that drive our country forward. Next, we have Anaya, the Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion at 3M. Anne has a long history of striving for equity. More recently, she pushed hard for transparency about workforce demographics and DEI progress. And after 4 years of advocacy, 3M released its inaugural DEI report in the first quarter of 2021. She also helped open new lines of communication to offer 3M's Inclusion Champions a chance to endorse company-wide DEI projects. And last but not least, we have Raul Anaya. Raul is the head of business banking and president for Greater Los Angeles at Bank of America. He serves as the bank Global Diversity and Inclusion Council and co-chair the bank's Hispanic Latino Executive Council. He also leverages the bank's brand to effect positive change across the local community. The result? In 2020, Bank of America delivered over 10 million in philanthropic support to over 200 different nonprofits. An incredible list of leaders, and we're fortunate to share their stories. I encourage all of you to read them in our current issue of Hispanic Executive magazine. And now it's my pleasure and to welcome Lisa Harrington of Bank of America, who will introduce the honorees and moderate today's discussion. She's the Managing Director, Business Strategy and Initiatives Executive for Consumer Client Services. Thank you, Lisa. We look forward to your conversation with our honorees.
Pedro, I am so delighted to be here today on behalf of the bank and being part of this incredible event recognizing members from the Hispanic Executives 2021 Top 10 Líderes issue. Executives among the best in their fields for being innovators, entrepreneurs, and visionaries, including our very own Raul Anaya. As you said, we have today in our panel Anaya, Cesar Ruiz, Natalie Rayas, and Raul Anaya. So let's get started. I would like to start talking about leadership during this crazy era of change. So, what are one or two of the major ways that your life has changed in this past year and how that has affected you and made you adjust as a leader? So, I'd like to take this question for all of you, and maybe we'll start with Anne.
Yeah, well, so thank you for gathering us and for lifting our voices and really for the recognition. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you. I think that one of the things I learned in the last year is really to embrace vulnerabilities in a way that allows for us to really find connectedness with others. And so I think many of us for so long want to be strong and put on a good face, and we kind of hide that vulnerability. But when we experience something like the pandemic or the civil rights movement that has really reverberated around the world, embracing those vulnerabilities will bring us closer.
That's great, and that's something I think about every day because it made us all be very connected during this time. Cesar, would you like to take this next?
These last 2 years with the pandemic and with having a very successful branding of our company and just finishing up a big victory for us with a union fight. We just are wrapping up the votes, and it was a very challenging period. As you know, there was a lot of fears at the very beginning. No one No one knew much information about the pandemic. Our clients were beginning to put things on hold. Our caregivers were fearful as to whether they wanted and risk working. And we had both a slight decline within the first quarter of last year. But we were able to quickly turn it around because we provided a lot of communications to the clients and to the caregivers to ease their fears. We instituted policies that we would take care of them during their time of sickness. And we paid them during that period of recovery. So we're very proud of those what we did. Also very challenging was the whole process of the PPE and getting access to it. That was very challenging. It felt like we were being taken advantage every day, because what used to cost 31 cents now cost us $1.60. What used to cost us $1.51 now cost us $6 for the N95. So there were very challenging times. We have gone through it. We had actually thrived after the first quarter, to the point that now we're 525 employees strong, caregivers, which 90% are single Latino women.
Thank you, Cesar. That's incredible, and it's hard to think about another industry that has been so impacted by the pandemic like yours. Thank you for that. Raul, how about you?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Hispanic Executive for the opportunity and certainly for the honor. I'm certainly very humbled. But the question, when I look back at the last 20 months or so, I learned that the world just slowed down for me and my family, and it certainly gave me a better perspective of what truly is important. And that's everything from having dinner every night with my wife and my kids, playing board games after dinner, taking walks. These are all things that pretty basic things, but quite frankly, because of my schedule, I just never did that with my family. And so it made me reflect on what really is important. And it gave me better balance and perspective of how to balance work, life, family. So, very grateful for the time that I had with my family, and I still have with my family. But that just, the world slowed down and I enjoyed it. It's now starting to pick up again as we start traveling again. But that's the biggest reflection that I had on the last 20 months or so.
Yes, I think as when the fall started and school started again was a reality shock for everybody after the pandemic, that, oh wow, life is back and the craziness is back, which is good, but we did enjoy the slowness. So Natalie, I would love to hear from you now.
Oh, well, such great answers from everybody. It's an honor to be among such amazing people. And thank you, Lisa, for moderating this important conversation. So, I decided to change careers. Pandemic took place in March 12th. We went under lockdown. And I said, how could I do more? How could I be more? How could I step up more for my community, for my children? And how can we, continue being the resilient community that we are? And so I went from the private sector as senior vice president for Grupo Salinas, overseeing their philanthropic giving and their foundation work in the United States, to jumping into the trenches, into being presidency of Latino Victory, because I said more needs to be done. And this election was so critical, and this cycle was so critical, that I did not want to sit on the sidelines. I wanted to be all in. And so the pandemic was a catalyst for it, because our community was suffering, is still suffering more than most. And yet we were asked to show up over and over again. We were those workers. We were what people, feeding our families. We were the people that were continuing moving our economy forward. Latinos are always asked to show up, and we continue showing up, and we continue being that economic force in our country. And so, I want to do the same, and have no regrets with this election cycle, and with how much we need to show up for each other, for our families, and for those who, you know, might not have the voices that we have and the platforms that we have, so that they too can excel and they can too, you know, move forward and build a prosperous family and community for themselves.
Thank you, Natalie. This is great. I was reading your profile. We'll talk more about that, but what you've been doing it's very exciting. All right, so Anne, I'm going to start with you. So one of the things that stuck with me about your profile and your background when you talked about being raised as a girl in your family and your brothers, and how uh, you felt, which I think all of us from Latin American Latinos can relate to that. How our brothers had some freedoms that we didn't have growing up. So talk to us about that a little bit. How did that influence you in your career as a person, as a professional, and how how do you wish this was different potentially?
Yeah, so one of the things I will say is it really formed an early um, priority and passion for me for opportunity and fairness. So, just by way of background, I come from a very humble working class family. My dad was a mechanic and didn't finish the eighth grade. He started working to help support the family. And so that working class background, you know, is something that's a part of me today, knowing that hard work, no matter what it is, contributing to the greater good is valued and important. In addition, the other piece of my background, the sort of boxes placed on women in a machismo family, the boxes placed on Latinas and how and whether they show up in places in our society. I've always questioned those boxes. And I think that early time of what's fair and why can't I have more opportunities like my older brothers really kind of was something that I used throughout my career to disrupt the possibilities. And so people make assumptions about where you belong, where you fit, what your potential might be. And if there's something I could tell to the future generations of Latinas and Latino professionals is disrupt those assumptions and create your own possibilities. So when I moved into whether or not I would go to college, I'm the first professional in my family. I had to disrupt the assumption that because I was from a working poor family, that I was supposed to go into the trades, not college. Once I got to college, whether or not I was someone involved in politics and the La Raza Latino Resource Center, that was more of my Latino colleagues and fellow students, not my fellow Latinas in the kind of political action mode at undergrad and then in law school. When I went to law school, you know, being a litigator and a criminal prosecutor is largely a white male profession, and it still is that. So I had to disrupt the assumptions of where it was I fit in these particular boxes. And that's what I would say to all those individuals who are planning their path forward, no matter where they are in their career, is do not limit yourself to what assumptions people place on you, and don't place assumptions on yourself. When I made the career move away from law and into chief diversity officer, again, you know, the idea was those roles are largely HR professionals, not lawyers. Those roles, unfortunately, are not filled with many from our community. And you know, one of the opportunities I think we all have is to find those spaces and places where we can make the biggest difference. Natalie, you talked about politics. That's absolutely a place, policy and politics. Where are we making a difference so that our voices are really valued and considered in our path forward for the future?
Thank you so much, Anne. And disrupt assumptions. That's what I'm taking notes here. Cesar, now it's your turn. You come, as I was saying before, from an incredible industry that was so impacted during this time. And now, on top of everything, we're dealing with our great resignation phase. We
Yes.
know how hard it is to hire people, we know how hard it is to retain people. You've done a great job in actively working to retain your workforce, your top performers. You're paying them competitively. You provide benefits. Talk to me. Talk to us. Um, how do you think your company, what it has done to stay competitive in this tough time to retain workforce?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Uh, it's getting to be a challenge even greater today than it was yesterday. Every day that we move forward, it's becoming more of a challenge, as you can all see. You can look in every industry and there's help wanted signs. We are no different. It's a challenge. When I first started, when I did my business plan, there was 300 home care companies within a 15-mile radius. And then you stop and think, how can you compete in an saturated market of 300 within a 15-mile area? So we began to dig deeper, and we found that the great majority of those businesses were mom and pop, caring for maybe 2 individuals, 5, maybe 10. Some of the franchisees that are in the area, like Visiting Angels and Home Instead, were a little larger, of servicing 60 clients or 80 clients. When we focused on how we were going to penetrate the market, our caregivers were front and center. We knew we had to, in order to draw the talent, we had to set ourselves apart from everyone else. And we did that immediately by providing a $15 minimum wage, and that was back in 2017. We have since inched up in that area. Our average hourly rate is between now $16.50 and $17.25. My goal is to provide even higher wages for caregivers. They are a direct reflection of me, my philosophy, the culture that I want to build in the company. And without them, I have no business. We have no business. So I learned very early, because I've been in business since a very young age. I had that privilege because my father fed me tons of motivational books. I read, Think and Grow Rich when I was 18 years old. That was my dad's contribution to my education in terms of motivating me very early on. And then second, since I worked since I was 13, having to contribute the check of my small earnings to the family, because I was under his roof and I had to contribute to him and to the family. But when I left the house at 21, and I actually never really liked it, but when I left the house at 21, he gave me a bank book, and that's how I got started. And I had my first major investment 22, because he had all those years he was saving my money, unbeknownst to me. Only he gave me to me when I left. And that was a big step up. And even as I speak it, the hairs on my arms raises up, because my father and mother had a major impact on my life. So to care for them, it was a big privilege. But we all, when we care for a loved one, we have our challenges, and we all need some outside assistance. And I wasn't very happy with what I was seeing. And back in 2000, I began kind of thinking about what if. My background has been more in financing for the 25, 30 years. Like Raul, I was in the banking business, and I left Regions Bank back in 2016. And I had 9 branches that I oversaw during that period of time. and I loved it. They didn't make it easy for me to leave. They wanted me to stay, but you always have to pursue your passion. So we started early with the markets back in 2000. It was a dream. Once I relocated to Massachusetts, we put it into reality. So we started with a great wage that attracted us immediately, because in our area, people were still paying, if you can believe it, $10, $11 an hour for these services. I believe that there's nothing more greater than an individual taking care of another individual. I always say that do an orientation of our staff, our new hires, that they're taking care of my mother and father. And those are just not words. Those are at the very core of my belief because of the way I was raised. And the compassion that my mother showed to my mother and my grandmother and to my father. Because of that watchful eye and because of that influence, we instituted a laughter program, an aroma program, and a music program in our services, because we didn't want to just do transactional services for our clients. We demand a lot, we pay well, and because of the things that we've done as a company to take care of our employees, it insulated us from this assault that we just experienced the last 111 days. And I know those days, every single of those days were very challenging, because never did I never put that in the business plan in terms of you will have a union fight. No one can tell me historically a company so young as ours, we're only 5 years old, this coming December will be our 5th year anniversary. No one can tell me on a union initiative, being a company so young. We're still in our infancy, but we weathered it. Because we had great caregivers. My wife is a woman of prayer, and one of the things that she's always done, and we've always done as a couple, is to pray for good people to come to us. People with love, people with compassion, people with understanding, because all those elements go into taking care of another human being. So we run a tight ship, and we provide incentives. We have educational programs that we do to elevate our caregivers to best practices to get their home health aid certification at free of cost. We don't charge them for that, not only for our internal staff, for our external staff. And now that we're removed under the umbrella, because when you're in a union situation, there's a no change rule. So many of the policies and benefits that we were going to implement earlier this year, we had to put them on hold because we couldn't fully document all those discussions. So we had to put them on hold until after. This quarter, we're going to pay out close to $20,000 in bonuses to our caregivers who met a perfect quarterly attendance. And for that, I'm very excited about, because that we've seen the results of it. And it's the best $20,000 bonus that I can, as a CEO, to do. And we're going to increase that as we move along. It's become very exciting for our staff. And because the more benefit that we can provide, the slower we can slow down the high turnover. It is a high turning industry. We impose that within our company because we don't tolerate bad behavior.
Yeah.
It's too important. We make sure that we have the background checks for our clients before they go in. We train them with best practices. We orientate them well. But benefits are key. If you go into any particular area, and we're the exception. Most the majority of home care in this space do not provide any benefit at all.
Yeah,
So I'm proud of the fact this year is going to be a year where we're going to continue making investments in our company, but it's going to be going directly to the various benefits. We're looking at long and short-term disability, expanding the life insurance and dental. These things have been very helpful because it's not just about we are a for-profit entity, but it's not about the money. We do the service, everything else comes together.
That's great, Cesar, and it's good to see that it. First of all, I'm glad you switched careers because you're doing the right thing and you're doing what you're passionate about and you're investing in your people holistically. Not only money, it's benefits and investment in other things that they can grow, and that's why you're being successful. Thank you for that, Raul. I was not aware that you started as a teller, so I was very excited when I read that. And today you are the head of business banking for Bank of America and president for Greater Los Angeles for the bank. And you're the highest ranked Latino at the bank. It's a huge responsibility. So talk to me and to us here. How do you ensure you're giving back to us employees at Bank of America? And how you're doing this also with your broader, greater community of Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, that designation does not get lost on me. And it's certainly a big responsibility. I take it very seriously. As you know, we've got about 200,000 plus associates at Bank of America, and we've got about 18% of them are Latinos, so we've got almost got 40,000. But I talk to many of my colleagues here in LA. I try to pay it forward. I try to share my story with them, and I mentor many of my Latino colleagues that are part of my team or they're not part of my team outside of business banking, and just share my story, and it's all about continuing to pay it forward and look back and see how we can help others. The great thing is I do work for a company that supports D&I in a very significant way. We've got a whole bunch of different strategies. I'm proud to be a part of the bank's Global Diversity Inclusion Council that looks at different ways to continue to accelerate diversity at the highest levels. I provide counsel to the GDIC and to my other executive colleagues about how we can continue to increase representation within their lines of businesses within the Latino community. And then here locally in Los Angeles, I try to find ways to help our community. I'm very proud of a nonprofit board. I'm on several nonprofit boards, but one that I'm very, very proud of is Ultimate Health Services. And that's because they do amazing services to the Latino community here in Greater Los Angeles. And I'm very proud of all the work that they've done in helping advance and provide quality healthcare, particularly during the pandemic, when we all know that our Latino community was disproportionately impacted because many of our, Latino do not have the same access to quality healthcare. But Ultimate is doing an amazing job by getting out and providing vaccination, providing initially testing, and just making our community healthy so that we can continue to grow and move forward as a community within Greater Los Angeles.
Great, thank you. And when I can say I have personally benefited from the great D&I efforts from Bank of America, and they have an incredible Hispanic Latino council that focuses on mentorship and sponsorship, and it's such a great way to connecting and continue to progress in our careers and understanding our cultural differences as well and how to continue to progress at the bank. So thank you for that. Natalie, your turn. You are a Latino political power. You're building, you work, as a president and CEO of the Latino Victory Project, which is huge, big powerhouse. It has influencers such as Henry Munoz and Eva Longoria backing you up. And in your profile, you did talk about that we as Latinos need to keep our eyes on the goal of achieving representation. And it's difficult to do that because we are so different, right? So Latino doesn't fit into one box, and we come from also different political spectrums. And you did passionately talk about the last election. Talk to us. How can we achieve this unity so we can get to this better representation? How do we get there? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
So I said that I'm a loyal Bank of America customer, first of all, and for 35 years. And Altamed, the president, Casa La Rocha, is on my board. So we're in good company. So thanks for the question. And so, Latinos are 18.7% of the total population in the United States, and yet we remain vastly underrepresented in government, serving in only 1%. Imagine, we're 18%, close to 19% of the population, yet we have 1% of elected positions in the country. Latino representation is even lower, despite our demographic and economic political influence. Supporting Latino and Latina candidates who support Latino issues is critical. Latino Victory works to increase Latino representation by recruiting and supporting Latino candidates at all government levels. It all matters. Local elections, school board, US Senate, and the White House, they're all important. It is important to support Latinos who also support issues that matter to Latino community and advocate for the community's well-being and treat us with respect. While the Latino community is not a monolith, which you've mentioned, we have common core issues that unite us as a community, such as support for affordable healthcare, which we spoke about here, for a while. A strong economy. We care about good paying jobs so we can feed our children, good education for our children, combating climate change, and support of our immigrant community. And so, how do we do this? Demography and demographics are not destiny. So we might have, 18% of the population, but we don't have 18% of the political power. While Latinos have, 32 million eligible voters, this power has not been harnessed, and it is up to us. Politics is a team sport. It's not Natalie. It's all of us together working in order to mobilize our community. Latino voters must be mobilized to vote if we want to cement our political power in elected office and beyond. Latinos are persuasion voters, and we've learned that over and over and over again. We need to be persuaded to vote. We need to be asked to vote. Our vote needs to be courted in order to be engaged. And organizations like mine and like ours, that's what we're doing. We're centering this mobilization strategy. And the key points is that we need to invest in voter mobilization early. We have to be consistent in our message, and we have to be culturally competent, speaking to our people with issues that they care about, and we have to deliver. We need to deliver for our people, and so that means good paying jobs, controlling climate, good education for our children, and going back to basics. We're not a monolith, and we need to treat each other as such and speak to each other in culturally competent ways.
That's great. I have to thank you for all you do and for driving this engagement and figuring out ways to get to us to represent ourselves better politically. So I want to have one super quick, let's call it a rapid fire, where each one of you are going to answer maybe one or two words. What, if you had one superpower, what would that superpower be? And I'm going to start with Cesar.
When I first read the question, instinctively, it was to heal. I care for a lot of individuals with chronic pain and the suffering. So we see a lot of suffering in the service that we do. So if I was a superhero, healing would be my superpower.
That's great. Anne, how about you?
I would say catalyst for positive change, embracing change, but also directing change in a way that helps our community.
Wonderful. Natalie?
I would erase inequities.
Very good. And
that's what I would do. If I could have a superpower and make sure that people lived a good life and have a sense of well-being by erasing inequities, that would be my superpower. And obviously my memory too. My memory kind of sucks. So, if maybe says that you can help me with that too.
Yeah.
How about you, Raul?
Kindness, being able to sprinkle kindness throughout our country, our world, so that we can all be kind to one another. Sometimes I think we forget something as simple as being kind to one another.
That's wonderful. I admire you guys, and my superpower was flying. I have to think about how I use my flying powers, but that's definitely what I wanted to do. I want to be able to fly. So that's wonderful. All right, so I think we are going to move to the Q&A session. So let me see here if we have a few questions. All right, so we have a question from Christina Merrill. The job market situation is complicated right now. The Great Resignation, remote work preferences, issue with childcare. What mistakes should employers avoid if they want the right talent? Who wants to take that one?
Lisa, can you repeat the question because you
Yeah,
broke up a little bit, so I
yeah.
didn't.
So the job market situation is complicated right now. With the, as you said, the Great Resignation, people wanted to work from home, issues with childcare. So, what mistakes we as employers should avoid making right now if we want to retain the right talent? What should we do? And I think, Susan, you've covered a lot of that with your space because you've done a lot. I would be, I don't know, Anne or Natalie or Raul, Bank of America. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Do you want to start?
I can start. I mean, certainly, I
Yeah.
think it's just listening to our associates and see what's important to them. I mean, we've come out of this 20 months later, and we're different. We've got many of us have different priorities. We don't necessarily have to work from home, work from the office 100% of the time. I think it's just listening and being receptive to new ideas and be open to new ways and new approaches. Business has changed monumentally, and being able to address how business is going to be done for the next several decades because of what we've come through, I think it will help all of us in the business community really understand how to retain, motivate, and promote our own employee base.
Yep. Great. Thank you. Anne, how about you?
I would say two things. Do away with this idea of fit and move to add. What value add will this person bring? And then also, we've for so long looked at experience and not skills. So what can this person bring to get the skill? What skills do they have to get the job done? Not what box was checked or what experience for a certain amount of time. But if we look at a skills-based approach to talent acquisition, then we broaden the pool.
That's great. Natalie?
I think that Raul and Anne really, solidified the points so that I wanted to make.
Thank you.
I would add flexibility. We
Mm-hmm.
need, as a CEO company, we need to provide our staff with flexibility. Our administrative staff, we've learned very early because of the seasonality of where I'm located in Massachusetts in the winter. We're like the mailman. We have to operate rain, shine, sleet, what have you. People depend on us, so we have to be operational. So we learned early to be mobile, way before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic did hit, we were already in that mode of working remotely, which really we became more efficiently organized as a company with Zoom. So a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to work at home. We do it during the winter season. We certainly did it during the COVID period. But also we provide our employees with the flexibility. We try to consult with the client in order for how do they want their hours, and we accommodate them. So flexibility is important. We're not unlike any other home care company where we dictate the hours of service that they're eligible for. So how do you want your 10 hours a week distributed? How do you want your 40 hours a week distributed? So we consult with the client and with our caregiver, giving them the flexibility to accept the schedule and to design the schedule So flexibility for us has been a paramount word that we've been using, and has been very helpful in terms of our caregivers being able to accommodate our caregivers. So we're an attractive company because of our flexibility.
Great, thank you. This is an interesting question I got from Kylie Evangelista. Bit out of the box, but what does the panel think about Elon Musk's challenge to the WFP to provide the budget and plan that would solve world hunger, and he will fund it?
Sounds great. Bring it on, I say. I mean, when I read that, I thought, wow, good for him, putting his money where it should be. So why not, Kyle? Let him do that. I think it'll be a great thing. More people should be investing in the right things instead of accumulating wealth.
Anyone else? All right, good. Instead of maybe flying somewhere too.
Exactly.
All right.
No, I didn't say that. You did, Lisa. No names mentioned here.
Okay. I think the next question is, what would you say is next for your particular industries, right? So thinking, I think, financial services and your industries in particular, what are the big things next? I don't know, Raul, if you want to take that. It's a broad industry, financial services, Bank of America, but what are the big things you're paying attention to right now?
Look, one of the things that I think we've all learned is how to work from home and leverage technology. I think the digital transformation of corporate America and all of our lives has really changed, whether it's Zoom, doing banking, and actually living your life off your phone. I think that's going to continue, and all that's being amplified through social media. But I think the biggest focus is really acceleration of the digital transformation of how it weaves through all of our lives and all aspects of what we do day in, day out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because it's both about your workforce, but also our clients in a way that we've never seen before in terms of digital adoption. Very good. Okay, I think, let me just see if we have one more question here. No, I think we are wrapping up. I want to thank you all. I had read about your bios and your profiles and your in the magazine, and it is incredibly inspiring and humbling to be here. I do want to thank you, not just being incredible leaders and what you do for in your industry, but also what you're doing for the community and to inspires us all. I'm sorry. And now I'm going to turn over to you, Pedro.
What a great conversation, and what great example of the depth of leadership we have in our community. I'm confident that all of us are walking away from this conversation with many nuggets of wisdom. And with that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. A big thank you to the honorees on our panel. And of course, thank you to Bank of America for your continued efforts to promote and advance Latinos. Gracias a todos. Hispanic Executive will send out a short survey after today's event, and we welcome your feedback. We'll see you at the next one, and have a great evening.